So I'm hoping this is going to work, and I'm not going to stay on my face for very long because it's going to chew up a huge amount of data just trying to deal with all the static shimmer that my camera on my laptop causes. But in this video, we're going to talk about setting up the robot so that you can use canned talons. In this video, we'll also go over reimaging your robot for the 2018 season. Now, at some point in the video, I'll say if you're just here to watch how to reimage a robot, I'll just say you can stop here. But other than that, really we're not going to go over too much. Now, I have set up my own little like test area down here. I got a motor down there, got my RIO, and then my power distribution board and my motor controller is over there. Now, I know that looks like a rat's nest. My power distribution panel is actually in use for something else right now. I've disconnected the controller for that, so I have some extra power to work with. But you'll just have to bear with me. The biggest point of concern is the end of the CAN bus over on the PDP, that motor controller there, the RoboRIO, and the motor if you're staying for the whole thing. If you're just concerned about reimaging the RoboRIO, then really the only thing you're concerned with is the RoboRIO. But that being said, let's get started. Now, I haven't reimaged my RoboRIO yet. That's why I'm doing this with you. A couple things I will say. You should always reimage your RIO using the USB. Never reimage over Ethernet. That's not a good idea. But basically, what you need to make sure that you've done is you need to make sure that you've installed the driver station update. This video doesn't go over that. If a video needs to be made to go over that, somebody let me know and I will make one. It's really not that hard, but it is something that has to be done so that you have the latest firmware. And it will probably be a couple of times this season before you even get to your first competition that you need to update the driver station software and all the associated tools that come with it, simply because there are changes made to either make them work better or to fix problems that existed when they were first made. So, that being said, I'm going to minimize that window. We are already well over the size of the first video that I made today, which means my computer's going to be tied up uploading YouTube videos all afternoon, I suspect. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to open the RoboRIO imaging tool. Now, if you installed the driver station software correctly, you should have an icon on your desktop that looks like a RoboRIO that you can just double click on and open the tool. And when you first open the tool, it's going to say searching for RIO targets. If you're using a new RoboRIO, you won't have things like team number or current image filled out, and the startup settings will be grayed out. But if you have imaged a RIO before, like it was last year's RIO or something, you'll see the name of the RIO. It will include your team number. It will say FRC, and it will allow you to change settings. What we're concerned with doing is formatting the target. So we're going to select the Format Target checkbox. You should only have one image in the list. That should be V16, at least at the time of making this video. It will probably change sometime in the near future, because there probably will be at least one update to the RoboRIO's firmware if they find a bug or something. And you're going to want to make sure your team number is correct. Now, because I'm not doing this from the context of the team, I always use team number 9999. Depending on your team number, this will need to be changed. Just make sure it's set correctly, because everything about your robot needs to be set the right way in order for this to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Reformat. It's going to check for login access just to make sure it can actually get in to do the imaging. And then once it's found the login that it needs, it will say Formatting RoboRIO Target, and a progress bar will appear down below. Now, the installation does take a little while. It takes anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes. Best thing to do is just let it be. Make sure you don't unplug the USB cable. Make sure your RoboRIO doesn't lose power. It needs to be on for the duration of the imaging process. Now, rather than make you guys sit here and watch all of this as the progress bar slowly creeps on, I'm going to pause the video, and when it's all done, I will continue on to the next step. So my RIO is finally re-imaged. When everything's all done, you'll see a window that looks like this. It'll tell you the IP address of the RIO and what its host name is. And it'll tell you that you need to deploy code to use the robot, which should be pretty obvious. In this instance, if you were just here to see how a RoboRIO is re-imaged, you're all done. Unlike previous years with the RoboRIOs where you had to install the Java runtime environment on the RoboRIO using a special tool, that is no longer the case. When you're uploading code, if the Eclipse tools see that your RoboRIO doesn't have a an installed JRE, then it will automatically install it for you. And the first time you upload code will take about 30 seconds as opposed to 10 to 15. That being said, at this point, if you were just here to see that part, you're all done. You can stop watching the video. If you have any questions, obviously you can ask me. There really is no troubleshooting steps if the RoboRIO doesn't image, because you've got a bigger issue if the RoboRIO doesn't image. Your best bet is to try again. If it still doesn't image, you may want to try a different RIO, because it's probably not going to work anyways. But that being said, the next thing that we're going to talk about is getting CAN working on the RoboRIO, specifically getting Talon SRXs to work with the RoboRIO. So each year, it seems like First and WPI remove another piece of the stuff that you need to use in order to get CAN to work with the RoboRIO, and that's also the case this year. Not only are the libraries completely separate from the libraries that come in the Eclipse plugins for robot programming, but now the actual web interface that you can use with the RoboRIO doesn't include the plugin that it needs, so you can actually see CAN devices in the web interface. So there's a few more steps if you want to use CAN with the RoboRIO. But that's what we're going to go over next. So one of the things that you need is something called the Phoenix tool suite. Now, I already have it installed, and I will put a link in the description where you can download it from. It's a fairly straightforward install. It's really, really simple. It's mostly just next, 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 wait, finish sort of thing. So you really don't have to worry about that too much. But one thing that you should know is when you install it, you should already have Eclipse installed, and you should already have the FRC plugins for Eclipse installed for the year. Now, I already have all mine updated. If you need assistance or a video on how to install or how to update the Eclipse plugins, I either have it or can make one to show you. But that stuff needs to be installed first, along with the driver station software. But because we just re-imaged our RIOs, the driver station software is obviously already installed. So that being said, let's get rid of this window here. We don't need it anymore. And we're going to open up an application that comes with the Phoenix tool suite called Phoenix Lifeboat. Now, Cross the Road Electronics makes something called the Hero. It's very similar to the RoboRIO. It does have some differences. But it like the RoboRIO is used for creating automated projects, creating robots, stuff like that. In order for the RoboRIO to be able to see Talon SRXs, Victor SPXs, Canifier, and the Pigeon IMU in the web UI, you need to install the Phoenix web-based config plugin into the RoboRIO. And it takes about 5 seconds. You should be plugged in through USB for this. And if you've changed the default admin credentials on your RoboRIO, which is generally not recommended, this will not work. You'll need to change them back to just being admin and an empty string for the password. But that being said, if you push this button, it'll take about 5 seconds. It will put the files in the RoboRIO that it needs, and then you'll get a pop-up saying robot controller is updated. And it will tell you that you probably should redeploy your code, unless you're writing in C++, which we don't, in order to get the interfaces working correctly. But that being said, we're going to close out of that, and we're going to close out of that. And that makes the web interface work for us. So to access the RoboRIO's web interface, this is the next step. You actually have to use Internet Explorer, specifically Internet Explorer 11. The web interface uses something called Silverlight, and Silverlight is not supported by pretty much any modern browser, including Edge. So why they haven't fixed that part of it yet, I don't know. It's all codependent on Silverlight. If it's not there, it won't work. So you will have to use Internet Explorer in order to get this to work. Luckily enough, I've already got it good to go. So we're going to jump over to the RoboRIO's USB web address, which is 172.22.11.2, and we'll expand the window. We see the RoboRIO here with its host name and just some general information. This is the USB address, this is the model and serial information, the firmware version, the operating system version, stuff like that. This is the CAN interface. This is that 2-pin plug on the RoboRIO. I can actually show it to you if I go like this and then go like this. There we go. So now we'll just point down. So that's the CAN interface. It's a little blurry, but where those two green wires with one of them that's got a yellow piece of heat shrink tubing on it, that's the CAN interface. That's what we're dealing with right now. So if I use my left hand to minimize this window. So with the CAN interface, we've got the PDP hooked up, and we've got a single Talon SRX hooked up. Now, one thing that I always recommend to teams is to make sure that your PDP firmware is up to date. The latest version is 1.4. We won't go over how to update that specifically, but it is exceptionally easy, and we are going to see how to update the Talon SRX firmware, and it is pretty much the exact same process, just with a different device. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in here, and we're actually going to change the device ID of this Talon from 0 to 1. And we're going to click Save. Now the device ID is how you reference a particular CAN device. Generally speaking, you wouldn't have two CAN devices of the same type that share device IDs. You can, but it's not necessarily good practice and could cause problems if you have too many sharing the same IDs. Now, remember I said of a different type. So if you have a PDP that is device ID 0 and a Talon SRX that is device ID 0, that doesn't matter. It only matters when you have a Talon SRX and another Talon SRX and another Talon SRX that all share the same device ID, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what we're going to do next is we're going to update the firmware on the Talon SRX. There is an issue where if the firmware is not up to date, the motor controllers won't actually respond if you try to write code with them. So we need to make sure that we are all up to date. So what we're going to do is we're going to log in. The username is just admin if you're using the default and there is no password. You click OK, it will load, and the only real indication that you'll have that you're logged in is the login button will change to say log out. Go figure. So I've already downloaded the updated firmware for the Talon SRX. I'll put a link to where you can download that in the description of this video as well. But I'm going to click on Update Firmware, and it's going to bring up a standard dialog box. Now, I have mine in my downloads. I do have to find it, which it is right here. So the file is going to have a CRF extension. You're going to click on that, and you're going to click Open. Now, this is one of those things that you should be doing through USB. You probably shouldn't be doing this through Ethernet, just to be safe. You're going to want to make sure that the robot is not powered off and you don't lose connection during the installation. So whatever you can do to reduce your chances of doing any of that, it's best practice to make sure that your area is safe and you're not going to mess anything up. So when you begin the update, it's going to say flashing firmware image, and it really shouldn't take that long, anywhere from like 2 to 10 seconds. And the only indication that you'll have when it's done is the things that were grayed out on the window before won't be grayed out anymore, and the firmware update completed successfully will be on the window. The fields on the window don't seem to have refreshed, but if you push the refresh button, they will. So the firmware version that I just had was 1.17, and now it's 3.3. Now, one thing that I didn't mention was why I changed the device ID from 0 to 1. When you purchase a Talon SRX, they all come with device ID 0. So if you're trying to set up a whole bunch of Talons, you can't plug them all in all at once because they all share device ID 0. So if you plug them in all at once, you're only going to see one thing in this list that says device ID 0. So the reason why I change it to device ID 1 is because if I were to hook up another Talon SRX, then I would want to be able to see device ID 0 and device ID 1. It's sort of like if you and your friend had the same address, but you lived in two completely different spaces. Like, how does the mail person know where to deliver your mail? There's two of the same address, and you both live 20 miles apart. There's no way of knowing. Um, so your friend might get your new $550 phone, and you might get his $20 box of safety pins. I don't know. I came up with something random. So I always change the device ID to 1, and then subsequently work my way up from there. 1, and then I connect another Talon. 2, and then I connect another Talon. 3, and then I connect another Talon. But now I'm going to pause the video for a second just to switch gears. I got to get on the floor with my assembly here so I can show you how everything's wired up. It's going to take me a second here. Alright. So over here we've got a motor. This isn't actually the motor controller we're using. We actually run this way, and I've got this motor controller hooked up, which is actually a Talon SRX, using wire nuts. But basically, the way this is hooked up is the PDP is where everything starts. You can imagine this wire here that's got the yellow heat shrink tubing on it. That is the yellow wire for CAN, and then this is the green wire for CAN. And we actually move over here, and we connect up in the same way to the CAN on the Talon using green to green and yellow to yellow. And then the Talon has an extra set of wires which runs over and hooks into the PDP using the respective colors that are marked on the PDP. Now, the reason why the PDP is the end is because the PDP has something called a terminating resistor inside. Basically what you need to know is the CAN bus requires a terminating resistor in order to function properly, especially as wire lengths get longer. So you're going to probably want to make sure that your PDP is the last in the chain just to be safe. So daisy everything together like what we have here. I didn't have more than one CAN device that I brought with me from Lawrence's build space, so I'm kind of limited in what I'm capable of doing right now. But basically, we have a basic robot set up here with a motor hooked up to a motor controller that we want to control using a joystick. This is the general idea. And of course, we've got power hooked up over there for the motor controller there, and then it just runs down and across to the motor. So now what I'm going to do is we're going to switch gears again now that I've shown you how this is all hooked up. And, oh, I lost my train of thought. Oh, and we're going to write a little bit of code using the Phoenix stuff. Alright, so I just wanted to make sure and verify before I did this little demonstration that everything was going to work correctly. So I wrote something real quick and tested it, and everything's working great, which is nice. Let me just make sure that this is disabled before we... Okay, so, basically, the way you would set up a CAN Talon SRX is, as long as the libraries from the Phoenix tool suite installed correctly, you should be able to use them right off. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to create one using WPI_Talon SRX. You can call it whatever you want, and you can have as many of them as you need, I guess. And then you're going to say new WPI Talon SRX, and then whatever the device ID for the Talon you want to reference is. Now remember, we set the device ID to 1 in this window, so that's what we're going to use in order to reference it in the code. I also created a joystick which will be connected to USB 0 on the driver station. And of course, under teleop periodic, I said motor.set j1.getY. So I can use the y-axis on my Xbox controller to make the motor move. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop up in the driver's station, and I'm going to enable it. You can ignore this red mark. It's because my power supply isn't exactly designed to put out the amount of energy needed to get a motor to move. But I can make it work. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to point at my motor. And you can see that it's turning a little bit because the y-axis on my Xbox controller is messed up a little bit. But I can turn it up and down and make it move back and forth. It's making the light on my power supply dim a little bit, but it does work. So that right there, ladies and gentlemen, is the general setup of CAN for FRC Robotics. Now, obviously, this was a very, very, very fast rendition. It doesn't show you how to set up a PCM in the chain. It also doesn't show you how to set up other motors in the chain. But honestly, it's just a matter of daisy chaining them together in the right way, using the right wire connections. It's really not too bad. But that being said, obviously, with any video, if you have any questions, feel free to email me and I'll answer them the best that I can, when I can. Obviously, if you have anything else that you want to know about, you can ask that, and if I have the time, I'll make a video, or it'll just have to wait until the next time you see me. I don't think there's anything else that I wanted to cover in this video. It's going to take me a while to upload it. But obviously, you can email me, you can ask questions, and I'll do my best to get you an answer. That being said, good luck, and I'm certain I'll see most of you well before the end of build season. Forgot that I unplugged my mouse to plug my Xbox controller in.